I'm Bob McCown. That's John Shannon, and this is the Bob McCown podcast on Sirius XM, channel 167, on your favorite podcast provider. We are saddened today. We lost a friend.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, shockingly, I was not aware, and I don't think you were aware, John.
Well, no, Bob,
Eugene's,
not at all.
Illness. We do not at this hour know exactly what the cause of his passing was, but we can suspect it related to the liver transplant he had a few years ago. We don't know that for certain. It was quite ironic that I left him a phone message on Sunday asking him to come on the program. It had been a little while.
He had promised me at the end of January. He literally said, "John, give me 6 weeks and we'll come on."
Yeah.
And so
and we
it was
passed
about
6 weeks,
Yeah.
and so I literally left him a message on Sunday, having no idea. We're going to talk a bit about Eugene Melnyk, what his image and lasting image will be, and what we experienced with this man. We're going to do that, but first, some reflections on an extraordinary Sunday in Toronto as the Canadian national soccer team blitzed Jamaica 4-0, qualified for the World Cup in Qatar, and can't think of a guy who has more experience with the national team. Bob Leonarduzzi, former coach and player with Canada's national team, now affiliated with the Vancouver Whitecaps in the MLS. Bob Leonarduzzi will join us after these messages. McCown and Shannon back with you. We're joined by a familiar face and voice to those who have been soccer fans for a long period of time. Bob Leonarduzzi, the former player with Canada's national team, coach, and has had a variety of influence in this sport over the years. But 88 was pretty good, but not
86.
quite, or 86 rather, yeah. But not quite like this, Mr. Leonarduzzi, was it?
No, this was magnified by 1,000 times. I actually, having been through it and qualified in 86, and we did it in Newfoundland in front of 7,000 people, very passionate people. But this one is fitting of the era that we're in, and great crowd at BMO Field, and the emotion of the players after the match was evident. Some of them were shedding tears, and it's a big moment for the game, and it's almost a launch pad to greater growth for the sport of soccer in Canada.
So, Bobby,
Go ahead,
Bobby, Bobby, what, when you were watching this game, I don't think there was any doubt that Canada was going to beat Jamaica.
Yeah.
But how did your emotions change, and how did your emotions grow as the game went on?
You start off always. I mean, my telltale sign is, even though I'm not involved, the butterflies start long before kickoff, and then you kick off, and you know that it would have to be a total collapse not to get through. But nevertheless, you're still uncertain, and you're not confirmed to go to Qatar yet. And then as the game went on, after the first 5 minutes, I just thought, okay, it's just going to be a matter of time before we score, because we just had so much dominance in terms of passing, possession, and possession in dangerous areas. And then as the game wore on, I realized it was going to happen. It was just a question of getting that first goal. We got that fairly early, and then after that, it was in cruise control. And then you're just waiting for the final whistle to go to officially confirm that you're going to Qatar.
John Herdman is the head coach, appears to be some kind of soccer Houdini. And everything he touched seems to turn to gold, for lack of a better term.
He's oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to ask you, was there a point where you saw the future of Canadian soccer really taking a step in the right direction? Was it before Herdman?
Well, and we are the beneficiaries of having had Alfonso Davies with us from a very young age, and then having sold him on to Bayern Munich. When that kind of player starts to come through the system, and Jonathan David's another, then you're starting to produce players who can go to any level and have an impact. Those two are Davies in particular is one of the best left backs in the world. And we've never had that before. So the players were starting to come through the pipeline, and John did wonders with the women's program. And a lot of there were a few people that suggested, well, a women's coach coming to the men's game. I never doubted him. If he adopted all the principles that he did with the women, that were not necessarily soccer related, but just building the infrastructure, then on the men's side, then we would have success. I was reminded yesterday, I did an interview, and somebody pulled out a quote that I'd had from 2018. And it was a doom and gloom type interview. And the guy said, when will we ever qualify for the World Cup? I said, we'll qualify in 2022. I think Herdmans coming across to the men's side is something that will benefit the program greatly. And then again, the players coming through the system, it's a perfect storm. We should never, and we're part of co-hosting in 2026, which is exciting as well, but we should never not qualify for another World Cup. And when I say that, something may happen along the way through one of the qualifying processes, but we should always be representing CONCACAF, one of the countries representing CONCACAF. Plus it goes to 48 countries in 2026. And at that point, we're going to have another couple of spots in CONCACAF.
Well, I'm sure, with no disrespect intended, I'm sure the Italians are pondering your message that, well, we should never not qualify.
Yeah, two in a row, but the irony of their demise as far as World Cup qualifying is concerned, it's sandwiched between a Euro title, and that just doesn't make any sense. So
None whatsoever.
It's crazy,
really.
crazy.
Yeah.
What is it about Herdman? Those of us on the outside don't, coaches are coaches. What is it that this guy? What is the magic that this guy has that he can galvanize a group of high profile guys that are making lots of money? That what does he do that makes him different than previous coaches?
Well, I think we've had some good previous coaches, saying that because I was one of them. But I think what John brings to the table is he brings an infectious type of approach, and a positive approach, and his attention to detail in terms of set plays or match preparation. He will make sure that everything both on and off the field is exactly what it needs to be, so that when those players step out onto the field, they have nothing to worry about other than following the game plan. Tactically, he's done it in games, and he did it in particular in the United States game early on. He will actually change formations, and most of the time you change formations from game to game. In his case, he'll change a formation 30 minutes in if he doesn't like the look of what's going on, or it may even be predetermined. And that's something that you really need to work at, so that the players understand, okay, we've gone out with a certain game plan, and 30 minutes in, we're changing it. And so, and every player understands exactly what their role is in that process. The other thing that he does, and this isn't technically related, is he demands a buy-in that's all in. And so when they're adopting a press in a game and they're trying to push as high up the field as they can when they don't have the ball, everybody knows exactly where they need to be. And there's times where that's worked to perfection. And then there's times where he's pulled the press off. But every player, if you were to ask them, I'm sure will tell you before they step out onto the field, they are completely aware of what their responsibilities are.
There was hope at the beginning of this process that Canada could get in. Legitimate hope. I mean, there's hope. Hope is a funny word because you always have hope, but there was a real sense that they could get in. There was no sense that I got from anybody that they were going to steamroll the opposition the way they have.
Yeah.
And they have literally crushed this group. Take away the Costa Rica game, and this team is essentially unblemished. And they've done it with offense as much as defense. And that too is shocking, because you think of a country that hasn't been to a World Cup in 30 plus years. You'd think, well, let's play conservatively. Let's try and win every game 1-0. Just keep the biscuit out of our own basket. They haven't played that way. Can you explain it?
Well, the way that the qualifying evolved, and because of our ranking, I think at one point we were close to 100 when John took over, and now we're 33 and probably going to bounce up higher, which would benefit the whole what pot we're in scenario. But I think that when you look at how it evolved, early on we were steamrolling countries, which we should have been, because we were playing Antigua and all these islands because of our lesser ranking. So we needed to get through that, which was inevitable that we would. It's ironic because if you recall, I think it was the second game against Honduras at BMO Field, we actually drew that game 1-1, and Honduras scored first. And at that point in my head, I was thinking, well, there's going to be a transition from beating up on teams regularly to now understanding that the opposition is going to be more difficult. But there was a hiccup early on, but that didn't last long. And then as they were familiarizing themselves with the quicker pace of the game and all that comes with playing against tougher opposition, they just adapted and we're being dominant in most of the games. I mean, ironically enough, you say in Costa Rica, which is accurate, we lost, but down to 10 men, and we're pummeling them. We're in the second half, they can't get out of their end. And that's another great example of confidence, is he was subbing players on that were attacking players and just going for it. And we were very unlucky not to win that game. But I just think that there's been a long enough period of time and early on to have those games where you know you're going to win and you can work out the kinks in your system and then get to the real opposition in the octagon.
The interesting thing about this team, though, is there was always stories behind the scenes that there was tons of egos. And I mean, how this seems to be the magic that he has, that Herdman has. He's been able to take all these egos and make them one. I mean, hey, how many players has he played through this tournament? Over
38,
30. Yeah.
38 players. That's another telltale sign that we're in a different era right now. Because when we went to the World Cup in 1986, Tony Waiters had 22 players go. And ironically enough, there weren't many more beyond that you could seriously say we're going to make an impact on the squad. This squad is much different, and we're unearthing players as we go along. We got the kid Ike Ugbo, from former Chelsea player, who he's convinced with a dual nationality to come and play for Canada. And there's probably more like that.
Oh, and by the way, and I don't have to remind you, there were, in the old days, it was other countries convincing guys with 2 passports to go play for them, not play for us, right?
No, exactly. And it's all changed. And the next 4 years, I think will provide a more significant growth in our game. There's been growth when you look at MLS, CPL, and you look at what's happening in MLS with I believe it's 28 teams now, and cities clamoring to get in and
Right.
paying $700-800 million to get in. So the game isn't going away at the professional level now. It's just going to get better and better. And we have timed it right, if you can suggest that, because 36 years is a long time not to get to a World Cup and not get there again. But we've timed it right now so that all the stars align. And what I'm looking forward to is the friendlies that take place in between now and Qatar, and excited to see what kind of opposition we can play against. Then Qatar is going to be fascinating, because I would like to manage expectations on John's behalf, and not that he's asked me to do that, but going to the World Cup is a hell of a lot different to, and the quality of opposition you're going to get there is a lot different to what we get in CONCACAF. Having said all that, because we steamroll through the group, you have to feel confident going in that you can get a result. My expectation of success would be if we get out of the first round. I think that should be viewed as success. And then beyond that, you've got single game knockout, and anything can happen at that point. The one thing that I do want to suggest, because you've got a big audience, is if anybody thinks, for the casual fan that is now maybe jumping on the bandwagon because we're going to the World Cup, if they're thinking we're going to win it, I need to let them know that that's likely not going to happen.
The expectation's a little different than '86, when I think we would have been happy that you scored a goal, right? But you didn't.
There's no doubt about it. And ironically enough, I still get reminded to this day, because the bookies were giving really good odds. No one thought we'd score a goal. So if you put some money down, your return was pretty good. I had the best chance to score in that tournament against Russia in the final game. And I was in the 6-yard box. The ball actually landed at my feet, and I took a swipe at it, and I hit the turf before I hit the ball, and it was a feeble effort. But I get reminded about that to this day from people that say, you cost me money.
In this sport, coaches are often categorized in advance as being offensive or defensive in mindset and approach. Where is Herdman? Is he a coach who loves offense, or what is he?
He's pragmatic. He loves offense, but he's not going to go and attack you if he knows that in doing so, you're leaving yourself exposed to the back end. So, and that's what I've enjoyed watching throughout the process. For example, I mentioned the United States game early, and they went there, I think it may have been the 3rd or 4th game. So it was early in the octagon, and they set up by actually pressing the Americans in their backyard. And then a little while into the game, he pulled the press back. And so I think he'll do what he needs to do. The most important thing to, I think, note is that he will determine how he plays, not necessarily based on the opposition. He's not going to sit back and just soak up pressure for 90 minutes and hope you can get a counterattack and score like Northern Macedonia against the Italians. But he will look at it, and he will decide how he wants to play, and will change it around in a match. So I think by nature, he wants to attack. He wants to go and win the game on the basis of the merits of his squad. Having said all that, sometimes you have to acknowledge that maybe, you go in as the underdog and you have to approach it a little bit more cautiously.
Does he play a style that is commonly played at this level? In other words, it seems to me that this team gets a lot of its offense out of breakouts out of their own defensive zone, long passes that materialize, and more than just setting up in the offensive zone and executing there. Yeah. I assume there's some deliberate, that must be deliberate, because it happens with great regularity, isn't it?
Yes. And again, in some cases, it depends on the quality of the opposition.
Sure.
For example, you've got Jonathan David, you've got Tejan Buchanan, you've got Alfonso Davies when he was playing. You got 3 guys that have track stars or track runners pace. And so if you've got room in behind their back 4, then that's something that you definitely want to exploit. So it really depends on how the opposition plays. I mean, the irony is the pace didn't matter all that much in Costa Rica, because they were so far back. There was 11 men within 30 yards of their goal. So there was no space to attack in behind. So, and that's a good example of how did they play that game? Well, they were cautious. They went around the back. They took their time, and they waited for that right opportunity to attack when there was the space that had materialized. So, I think again that goes back to John's strength, which is we're not going to play one way and assume that that's going to get us results. We're going to look at what the situation dictates as a result of the opposition we're playing against, and adjust to that. But again, and I don't even want to suggest for a minute we're very good defensively. Every player works their ass off. They know that they need to do that, and he's instilled that in them. But at the same time, if you were to ask John, I'm sure he'd say, if you didn't have to worry about the opposition, other than there were stick men out there, how would you play? And I'm sure he'd say, I just want to go at them, score as many goals as we can, make it exciting for the fans.
But really, Bobby, isn't that the difference between Canada over the last couple of decades? Is we always could play a little bit of defense. We could always be good defensively. It's the offensive side of the game that has changed for our country, correct?
Correct. And again, credit to the coaching staff. But when you have a player like Alfonso Davies and Jonathan David and Tajon Buchanan has come out of nowhere. Like, right. And when John started up the qualifying process, he was just kind of finding his way. Against Costa Rica on the weekend, he played like Alfonso, like he was tearing them apart. So I think that John's instincts are to attack, but now there are the horses there that can actually get that done for you.
Well, the other guy that needs to be mentioned in that context, if you're talking about offense, is Kyle Larin, who can certainly put the biscuit in the basket, as they say.
Yeah,
he has that skill set.
Yeah, and he's had it from the time he came out of Ontario and was drafted by Orlando. He started scoring early there, and then there were some issues between him and the club, and then he ended up going abroad. It took him a while, but the Turkish club that he's at, he's scoring on a regular basis, and they're regularly in Champions League, and that's again something else. Your best players are playing in leagues where they're getting matched up against the best players in Europe, which maybe not from a World Cup perspective, but all the best players go to Europe, whether it's from South America. I mean, they start off in certain places and they go there. So that's the melting pot. And our players are getting that experience on a week in, week out basis.
You mentioned a name earlier in the conversation, and I actually thought of it on Sunday and wondered, what would the late Tony Waiters think?
Tony Waiters will be looking down right now and be very, very happy. He and I think in general he'd look at the state of the game now versus where it was then. I mean, there's a quick story I'll tell you about Tony Waiters. When we qualified in '86, the NASL folded in 1984. There was 2 years where some of the players weren't playing at clubs, and the better ones. Not the better ones, the ones that were in Europe were getting that, but that was maybe a third of the players. Tony had to put together a program where we made trips abroad just to get the guys playing time. And to do that, he had to go to the CSA and say, hey, I need money. I need money to get these guys ready so that we can get to the World Cup. And that happened. And the CSA was in debt. Had we not qualified for the World Cup, the CSA was in danger of going bankrupt, but he convinced the then president at that time, Jim Fleming, to do it, and he reaped the benefits as a result of that. It's even my situation in the build up to 86. I was playing indoor soccer. I played a qualifying match against Haiti in Victoria, and then I flew back to Tacoma and played an indoor game that night, and I scored. I should say as well. So, but what kind of preparation is that, or what kind of type of quality of preparation is that? It's not. So we're in a whole different era now.
Bob Leonarduzzi is with us, the former coach and player for Canada's national soccer team. We'll continue the conversation after these messages. Bob McCowan, John Shannon with you on the podcast today and on the radio show on Sirius XM with Bob Leonarduzzi today. I don't think lost on anybody is the fact that Canada closed this out without almost inarguably certainly their most exciting player and probably their best player in Alfonso Davies. Is there any doubt in your mind that he'll be ready for Qatar?
It's hard for me to really say with conviction. I'm assuming so. I'm what I'm hearing is that he will be ready. Having said that, he was supposed to be ready for this these 3 games that they're currently playing right
Exactly.
now. So anytime it's related to the heart, you worry about it. But I without any real ammo that I can suggest I have, my hope is that he is. And if you look at him and you look at how invested he's been, in the games, even the games that he hasn't been in, he seems quite lively and optimistic. So hopefully that's a good sign.
You know him well. Did you know when he was 16 and playing for the Whitecaps that he was going to be the player he is?
He came to us at 14.
Wow.
And he was playing in the U16s. First of all, we had to convince his mom to let him come here, and I think it speaks to the humble nature that he has. Like, he's just a really, really nice guy, even with all the success. I haven't spoken to him since then, but since he left, but I don't think that he would have changed any. I don't see, even in his interactions with people, that he has done. But came to us at 14. Played in the U15 team. Within 2 or 3 games, too good for that. Moved up to the U17s. Same thing. He was just torching people. Goes to the reserve team. A handful of games, and he's gone to the first team. So he was in the first team at, I think, 15, maybe 16. And what was interesting is that every level that he went to, he wasn't just another player. Even from the first game that he played at the next level, he was a difference maker, and he was just flying by people. And so when he gets sold to Bayern Munich, I'm thinking to myself, okay, now that's a big leap. You're going to one of the best clubs in the world, and presumably it'll take you time to get in. It didn't take him long. Like, I think it was within a half a season, and then he hit the ground running again. He was one of their best players. So his ceiling, he hasn't got one. Like, he's just able to get better and better. And we saw that in qualifying. I mean, there was a significant moment against Panama when he turned on the afterburners, and the guy thought it was going out, and he gets there, and then he goes on and scores what was a critical goal at that time, because that was a Panama team that actually had us, that were out possessing us at that time, and it was a kind of against the run of play, but it took our best player to lift others on his shoulders and get us there.
Describe, if you can, his skill set. What is it that he does best?
Well, there's a difference between having pace and using it than just having pace. If players are quick, but they're straight ahead, you can defend that. I mean, you need to make sure you're positioned well. In his case, he has speed, and I used to think early on when he came to us, he would, and it happened way too often for it to be anything other than by design. Like, he would knock, if he had space in front of him, knock the ball out in front of him and open his legs and get going. And a lot of times defenders would come across and he'd knock it that far ahead that the defender would think, okay, I can go and win this. And they go to ground, they slide in, and they're assuming they're going to win it. And then he turns on the afterburners. He gets there, he takes a little touch, and the guy's on his ass and he's running away from him. That happens regularly, and I've seen him do it at Bayern Munich in Champions League games against very good defenders. But he has the ability to beat you with pace directly. He can jink and wrong foot you and go by you. And when he was with us, the thing that he needed to improve was the quality of his crossing. That's happened. Like, when he gets into those areas where it requires a good ball into the box, he's doing that. And the Bayern strikers are the beneficiaries of that. So, and the other thing is, a lot of forwards, would prefer not to defend in the era that we're in. You have to, like, you need to go forward, but even if you just make yourself a nuisance defending, then you need to do that. He seems to like defending and will do what he needs to do in order to get the ball back. So he's the complete package.
Do we run the risk of talking too much about Davies at the expense of all the others?
Yeah, we do, absolutely, because the supporting cast, and I shouldn't even refer to them as supporting cast, they are a team, and John will ensure that everybody has the same importance to the group that Alfonso does, or a Jonathan David does. But on that note, I'll take this opportunity to talk about Milan Borjan and the defenders and pre-tournament. That was kind of a, were we going to be good enough at the back? And you look at guys like an Alistair Johnson, who is a solid player, but he appears to have gone to the next level of qualifying and upped his game, and others have as well. Stephen Vittoria, Sam Adekubi. I mean, he has been unbelievable. He was the flair that he's shown, the goal that he scored against the Americans, where he took off from the halfway line and finished it clinically, just like a striker. I mean, there aren't any real weak areas in the group right now. We're going to find out against better opposition if, in fact, we may get exposed in some areas. But right now, everybody, I'm sure, is feeling very confident about this journey that they'll now embark on to the World Cup in Qatar in November and December, and it's going to be a very exciting moment for them.
What is the role of in the growth of this game? You touched on it a bit earlier about what MLS has contributed, what the Canadian Premier League has contributed. Are we going to see another growth spurt of the game in our country? Because there's tons of kids that play the game. In our country. I mean, the amount of soccer players in our country is staggering.
Yeah.
But it's to get to the next level. Do you see this as someone who's been involved in the game so long that this could vault the program even higher?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. It's going to happen. It's going to. Before we get to that, the other major benefit that we don't talk about very often, but that John has harped on from the time he took over, is get to the World Cup and you get a big payday. Like it's in the millions, and it's enough that you can put that back into your program. So if you're qualifying for every World Cup, I think it's around 15 million that they're talking about. And it's actually on a per game basis. So if you go further, then you make more money. But that's the thing that we've been lacking. We get the Sport Canada money and then generate, through gate receipts, which has been minimal, but there hasn't been the money to invest in the game. As far as the game in general goes, and I've always said, we never have to worry about how we're doing recreationally in soccer, because the numbers are, as you said, they're staggering. They're going to get greater. What we need to do now is maybe there's that kid out there that's a very good hockey player, and is not really thinking about soccer. Maybe he watches that game and he sees, if you're a good enough player within Canada, and Alfonso Davies has proven it, and so has Jonathan David, and so has Tajon Buchanan, you can go abroad and you can make very, very good money. So we've never really had the ability to compete with NHL. I think if a player was a good athlete, good soccer player, good hockey player, he's going that way. So I feel like that there will be a significant uplift in the game. And the best part is 4-year window. Like Qatar is great, but for 4 years after that, the world's coming to us. Yeah. So we, in between 2022 and 2026, it's the interest in the game is going to be huge, and we can capitalize from that through just ensuring that we continue to get the infrastructure of the professional game right.
So you bring up an interesting point, and we've talked about this in the past. Organizationally, is the CSA ready for it? I mean, because you touched on hockey. So much of the success of hockey in our country now points back to what Hockey Canada has done on the business side, and their program of excellence, and the amount of money they're able to generate to put back into programs. But it took a long time in hockey to do it properly. It took decades to do it properly. Yeah. Is soccer ready to do that?
I think soccer is ready to do that, and I believe the MLS clubs are a good example of that. In that the CSA were pre-MLS were the ones that delivered the elite training, for want of a better expression, for those players that were good enough. But they didn't have the money to invest to do it properly. And that's not a knock on them. They just didn't have it. So they now have relationships with the MLS clubs. Like they don't, in terms of player development in British Columbia, like we do it.
Mhm.
They've said, okay, you do it. And you've got the financial resources, you got the physical resources, the training facilities. So you do it. And you know, they'll focus their efforts on everything beneath that and up. And what's starting to happen is if our owner, when he got involved in 2003, and his son is Alex Kerfoot. Yeah, he said to me, what kind of infrastructure do we have at that time? I said, well, we don't have any. He said, so how does a player get from playing youth soccer to our club? I said, there's no real set way. The CSA are involved in it. We're involved in it. Private academies are involved. So players and parents of players are getting tugged in different directions. That's not happening so much anymore. I think the structure is a lot clearer. And with this next 4 years and the boom in the game, I think the structure will get better and better. And then, of course, you know, you talk about the men's side, then there's the women's side. You know, there's talk now of potentially a Canadian professional league. Yeah, and that would be fantastic, given, you know, what they've done, winning a gold medal at the Olympics. So it's not just the men's game. I think our sport is at a point where it can really accelerate the evolution of our sport.
One of the intriguing things, we talked about this earlier in the week, Bobby, historically, the soccer fan base in Canada, and there are plenty of people who love soccer and have loved the game.
Put your hand up, Bob. Put your hand up, Bob.
The ethnic groups.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
And one of the issues that we've had in this country is this division between the history of the family and where they're from, and rooting for the team that dad rooted for, or granddad rooted for, great granddad, etc. And then Canada. And we've seen situations where there were friendlies between, you know, a Canadian team and a Greek team or an Italian team. And guess everybody's rooting for the opposition. Does this change that, in your opinion?
I think it will. And it's just a great example of what you've just referenced. We played a World Cup qualifier at Varsity Stadium to go to the World Cup in 1994 against Mexico. Mm-hmm. And I thought, hey, Toronto, that's a good place to play. I think we're going to get a pro-Canadian crowd. We came out onto the pitch like an hour before the kickoff, and it was a sea of green and white. Like it was all Mexican fans. So there's no doubt. And I talk to people now of different ethnic origins, and they're definitely for sure taking notice now. And Alfonso has helped in that regard. It used to be that if you talked about, you know, even the club side, the Whitecaps, if you talk about them and you're talking to Italians or English, there was a segment of them that would say, that's crap. Like, I'm not going to watch that. And they just don't even give it a chance. And that's unfortunate. But I do think that as a result of our national team, you know, having the success they've had, and probably if you really isolate that group and you look at the Americans and the Mexicans, we should have beaten the Mexicans in Mexico. We were the better team there. We beat them here. The Americans were, you know, we played in Nashville and we were the better team on the park. So if people want to look at that as a barometer and say, whoa, like they finished top of the group and they manhandled two of the better countries in CONCACAF. And I think Mexico's in the top 15. So what's going to happen is we're going to get, just by virtue of how well we're doing and ideally continue to do, I think we're going to change that around, and I think we'll get you know, the Italians and the English, and they'll be ideally supporting wherever they come from, but also you know, where they live. And in that, you know, in that regard, I think of TFC. One of the things we did before we started up in MLS was we went there and we talked to them and said, you know, how did you guys hit this market, which all these ethnic groups out there? And they said, what we did was, he said, look, we actually engaged it head on. They said, we said to them, do not stop supporting wherever you come from. Please continue to do that. And we don't want you not to do that. But you have an opportunity to come to a pitch and be a part of that soccer atmosphere on a weekly basis. And I think they made headway with that, because I think people can understand, yeah, I love my country. I love my club team for my country, but I can do that in my backyard as well. I can support as many teams as I want.
The other question I have is, what influence might this have on players from around the world coming to MLS, if at all?
I think that's already started. Like, and what we're starting to see now is less of the, and I'm not being critical of any player, but more so the age of the player. You know, when New York City came into the league, they had Lampard, they had Pirlo, and those players, they could still play. There's no question, but they were at the tail end of their careers. And if I look back to the old NASL days, it's probably one of the things that hurt us the most. It was, we were spending all this money on the players that we thought would put bums in seats. They didn't, and we weren't any better off, and we hadn't produced any more North American players. So it's I think what we need to do is really try to, and what we are doing now, and what the league are doing, is they're saying, go, you know, have a recruitment program where you can go, and you can go throughout the world, and you look at the places like South America where there's diamonds in the rough, and look at bringing those players in at a lesser value, and then make them better or have them become better, and then all of a sudden you've got an asset. So it's the whole shift, the whole thinking of the league has shifted from the time we got in to now, and I think players at younger, Insigne is coming to Toronto. It's probably not great timing for him to be coming to Toronto, because I'm sure there's a lot of Italians there that aren't quite happy with the team right now, but yeah, he's still going to be a very good player. It's
an exciting time, and as much or more than we've ever experienced in this country, because this time we're not just going, we're going with some level of possibility and optimism. Not of a championship, but of some level of success. And
we can compete. We can compete.
I think that's what these guys have proven. And I don't think they're going to be afraid of anybody.
No, I don't think they will be either. And again, it's if we can get there, and in that first game, you know, come out like we left off, ideally in a couple of nights, or tomorrow night against Panama in Panama, then, and we hit the ground running, I don't think there's any doubt that we can get results. It's it will just be a question of getting in there and getting used to the environment. And I mean, they're going to be playing in air-conditioned buildings. It's it's quite phenomenal.
No, we like the snow advantage, Bobby. We like that.
Yeah, no, that's a disadvantage to us for sure.
I don't think there's likely to be much snow in Qatar. And don't get to the building late, because it may be torn down by the time you get there if you're a little late. Yeah. Bobby, thank you so much for taking time for us today. It really is an intriguing and an exciting time for Canadian soccer fans, and nobody better to relate to than to you and your history. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Very much enjoyed it.
We'll be back after these messages. McCowan and Shannon back with you. Our thanks again to Bob Leonarduzzi for joining us.
We didn't mention about the soccer. 1.7 million watched Sunday afternoon, Bob. 1.7 million.
I'm actually surprised it wasn't more than that, but well, that's a big number.
It is. Well, that's an average over 3 hours too. Don't forget. So that's not necessarily what it peaked at.
No, and it was not exactly a close game.
No.
I would imagine many people said, okay, we've won, and moved on to something else. Yeah. And maybe came back for the celebration. I hope they came back for the celebration, because it was long and it was serious.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've seen that drum beat thing.
Doesn't get old. It doesn't get old, man.
It doesn't get old, does it?
No.
You don't turn it off in the middle.
No.
We are shocked and saddened today with the passing of Eugene Melnyk, the owner of the Ottawa Senators, the former CEO of BioVale, and someone who I have known for quite a few years, maybe a decade. And
But you would have, were you not involved in that whole junior hockey thing at St. Mike's?
yeah, but before him,
That's,
Eugene,
gosh, that's 25 years ago, Bob.
yeah, but I did not know Eugene then.
Okay.
Eugene, we wound up, I was in a group with Dennis Mills and others, and we got the team for the school. And then the school decided to call on its alumni to help support the franchise financially. And Eugene ultimately, I guess, bought it and then did move it to Mississauga and then sold that franchise too. But that was all after I was involved.
Okay.
So I may have met Eugene back then, but I don't recall. But my relationship with him, I guess the real relationship dated back to, was it the All-Star game in Ottawa?
Yes, I remember we were standing at the National Convention Center, and Eugene drove up with and stood and talked to us for, gosh, an hour and a half.
Yeah, that was the Sidney Crosby story
Right.
that broke that week. And I remember he was all over me trying to find out what I knew about it. And I said, I'm not telling you because I'm going on air later on. And so that's, I don't think that was the first time we met. I know it wasn't, but it was the first time we really interacted face to face. And then I got the opportunity to meet him various times. I ran into him actually at Casino Rama once. I walked in and my casino host said, there's a VIP in the high rollers area. Don't bother him. And I just off the top of my head, I said, oh, when Melnyk's here, almost jokingly. And he kind of, his eyebrows raised, didn't say anything because he wasn't allowed to say who it was. And so I literally walked in there, a place that I was not familiar with. I walked in and there was Eugene sitting at a blackjack table with his back to me, all by himself, playing, I don't know, 3, 5, 6 hands all at once. And Eugene didn't play for small money when he gambled. And we wound up having I knocked him, I tapped him on the shoulder and he gave me a hug and we, went on to chat. And we had several social interactions up there and in various places. And I know there are Ottawa fans who hate the guy, who think somehow he is responsible for everything that's wrong with hockey in Ottawa. But I don't see him that way. I never have. I've seen him as a nutty but passionate owner and fan who has crazy ideas. He called me, and I think I told you once when we were sitting on our favorite couch at the old place, of a phone call I got from him the night before, the craziest idea I'd ever heard. He said, I got this idea. I think it's the savior of the franchise. And I said, what is it? He said, from now on, I'm only going to have Canadian players. No European players, no American players. I'm not going to draft anybody from all Canadians. What do you think? I said, are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
And he never did it, but he was serious when he literally called me at home with this, like 11 o'clock at night with this idea. I'm going to miss him terribly. I'm sure you have a few stories.
Well, I met Eugene when I was at the NHL, really. I knew of him. And when I was at MLSE, he tried to buy Maple Leaf Gardens. He tried to buy the old Gardens to put his junior team into.
Yeah, I remember that.
But the people at MLSE didn't trust him to, once he owned it, to put an NHL team in. And so it never happened. And so when he bought the Senators, and you're right about his passion about hockey, his passion about our country, Bob. He was remarkable at that. I don't think the Ottawa Senators would exist today without Eugene Melnyk. I think they would have moved. He was a stubborn coot about, no, I've paid my money and I'm going to keep this team. He wanted to win so badly. So the run in 2019 when they went to the conference final was a remarkable one. Did he get in his own way once in a while? Sure, he got in his own way. Sure, he did. But it wasn't for lack of trying. It wasn't for his lack of love of the game of hockey and the National Hockey League. And all he wanted to do was win. And what he learned, I think, in the end was it was easier to win in business than it was in sports. But he loved sports. And by the way, I say this respectfully, is he loved going on the air with you. I mean, even on the podcast, I would tell you right now, the night we put Eugene on this show, on this podcast, was in many ways a watershed moment for us, because he was his typical self. He told some great stories. It was during the pandemic. He had some opinions, and it got us some extra publicity. And what it really told people was, hey, McCowan's back. McCowan's back. And Eugene did that. And Eugene loved coming on. I still have his notes. I love coming on. I listen every day. That's what Eugene did. And he was a huge, he loved the old show, Bob. And because he lived in Toronto, he loved the old show. But Eugene, for all his faults, and trust me, he had faults, it came out of the love of passion of trying to make hockey better, the Senators better, and people around him better. Sometimes it got a little frayed, but it wasn't for lack of trying. He's one of those guys you do miss, and you will miss, and Senators fans are going to miss him. And the next story is not going to be, what's Eugene doing next. The next story is how are we going to be able to keep the Senators in Ottawa? That's going to be the next story, Bob.
There were many times when I wake up in the morning and see a story of something that Eugene did, and I would cringe.
Yeah.
And go, oh my God, and there were many times I called him and gave him shit for something he said or did. But at the end of the day, I love the guy. I was very, very fond of him, and I'm going to miss him terribly. And I think you're right. I hope you're right, John. I hope Ottawa fans come to realize or recognize that all Eugene did was try.
Yeah. And
as hard as he could. It may not have been the way you would have wanted him to do it, but it wasn't. It was whatever happened. It was not for lack of effort on his part.
It's the life of an entrepreneur. That's what it is. It's the life of an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Eugene Melnyk. For John Shannon, I'm Bob McCowan. We'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks for watching or listening. Goodbye, everyone.